The views expressed on the following program are not necessarily those of WPSL. However, we encourage you to like and share them on Facebook. It's time for Ask a Rabbi from Congregation H. Chaim and Rabbi Shafir Loeb.
Hello, everyone. This is Rabbi Shafir Loeb of Congregation Eitz Chaim, and this is Ask a Rabbi. So please feel free to give me a call at 772-340-1590. We're on Digital 1590 WPSL. And again, this is Ask a Rabbi. So please do feel free to give me a question. This is a Friday in the Hebrew month of Elul, which is the month preceding Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of the new year. We changed the calendar. It'll be 5780 in just a few more weeks. It's hard to believe that it's coming that soon. By the end of September, at the very end of September, we will be starting to celebrate the Jewish New Year and the beginning of the Days of Awe. And sometimes people ask me a lot of questions. They'll say things like, on Yom Kippur, are Jews forgiven for everything they've done? And the answer's not even close. I like to tell my congregation the good news and the bad news. The good news is, yes, you can be forgiven for those things for which you are, in fact, truly repentant and have done restitution. And they are sins against God. You have to get forgiveness from people for the things you've done to them. And so it's a day of coming close to God. It's a day of reconciliation with each other and with God. And so that's really important. It's the high holy day season, Yom Kippur being the high holy day, the day where a long time ago the Kohen, the priest, would go into the Holy of Holies, and while he was there, he would pray and ask God for forgiveness for himself, for his family, and for others. And so we're coming up to that season, and it is traditional at morning prayers this time of year, this month in particular, to sound the shofar, to create that awakening call that the shofar gives. It's a very unique instrument, and it's a ram's horn or a kudu horn, or there's a variety of different animals that have horns that can be sounded, and they're all called shofarot or shofar. And we, in our congregation, actually sound it before Shabbat starts on Friday night, so that for those who didn't hear it at morning services, they can come and see it. Come and hear it, rather, right before services start. And so we do that as a way to help people awaken. It's got a very unique sound. And one of the things that I like to challenge people, my Sunday school students and others, is to think about, Judaism, of course, started in the Middle East, where there are mountain goats and animals which have these wonderful little horns that you can hollow out and sound. But what would it have been like if we had perhaps started on Key West? I think our foods would have been very different. Certainly life would have been very different on an island. And what would we have blown? Probably the conch. Right? And so a conch actually blows much the same way as a shofar. The first time I picked up a conch, I was able to blow it because I know how to sound the shofar. And so you can sound it as well. And lots of interesting things. It's a very unique instrument. It's charged with awakening us. And the tradition, of course, anchors it in when Abraham was about to sacrifice his son and stops in the nick of time when the angel yells out to him, Abraham, Abraham, don't do it. He turns around and there's a ram stuck in the bush behind him, which is interesting, right? How do you see an animal behind you? But he sees the animal, and it's caught by its horn, and it is said that he blew that shofar the first time there, and that we'll hear the sounding of the other one when we learn to finally have real peace. Someday, right? We can hope for these things. And I guess at that point, that shofar will miraculously appear, and we'll be able to sound it. But in the meantime, we sound all these other wonderful shofarot. And there's a variety of styles. I was going to bring the very old one from my father that's in my case. God willing, I'll remember to bring it next week. I looked at it last night and said, do I need to put this on my purse? And said, no, I'm not going to do that. I should have. So I will do that next week and prepare it ahead. And then hopefully we'll be able to hear the shofar on the show. Because it's a unique sound, but I'll warn you, because you might have to set some of the equipment. It's going to be a loud noise, a loud sound. And the shofar is meant to awaken us. And so you can have the traditional style, which is short, the actual ram's horn, or you can get what's called a Yemenite shofar that is much longer and curly. They can make them quite beautiful. There's a variety of finishes and all kinds of designs and things. Which brings up an interesting piece. One of the things that we're instructed to do is to make the mitzvah, the instruction of what we're doing, to make it more beautiful, more glamorous, more elegant, more beautiful in one way or another. And so, that's the early, what we call practical rabbinics, right? Knowing how to set the cloths out so that they're appealing to people, how to set the chairs so that they're inviting. Why do you do this and why do you do that? It's always make fulfilling the commandment, make fulfilling the instruction more pleasurable, more enjoyable, more inviting to people. Which kind of gets to one of the things that I've noticed over the few years that I've lived, that are more than I care to count, but keeping up the count, my goal is to collect as many birthdays as I can. As long as I can count them, then I feel I'm in pretty good shape. That's the key, and hopefully staying mobile and working out and all those other good things. So put life in your years and years in your life together. So as I started to say, one of the things that I like to do is to look back at my life and see how the way that my father and mother raised me has so shaped by everything that I do. It affects how I shop. It affects. I know I've told the story on the show before about one time traveling with a friend and commenting that there was this store that I wanted to stop in, but that I didn't have the money to shop. And, and my friend said to me, well, that's okay. Why don't we just turn around and go in there and you'll just throw your purse in the trunk and that way you can't shop. And, I pulled in because I really wanted to. And then I didn't throw my purse in the trunk. And I said, I can't go into a store without being willing to shop. Says I need to be mindful of what my budget is, but I can't just walk in. It's not fair to a store to walk in and cruise and walk back out. Now, that's different from walking in the mall and window shopping, or, there the expectation is that people are cruising and just looking. But I was raised that if you're going to walk into a store, you have to be willing to shop. Even if you're on a tight budget and, perhaps you shouldn't, then you need to set the budget and or not walk into the store. And the question becomes, why is that important? Why is that a rule? Because that is actually a rule in something called Talmud, which is a Jewish code or a Jewish set of practices defined based on a Torah-driven life. And why is that important? Because if you've got a private shopkeeper, they might lower their prices. They might think their goods are not good. They might change what they're doing based on the idea that you're not willing to shop. And so you can actually do unintended harm to the shopkeeper. And it's just a mindfulness of being aware of how and what we do and how it affects others. Because there's so many things that we do that, whether we realize it or not, have tremendous impacts on others. Casual comments that we think are unimportant, making a joke of something. We often think, well, that's no big deal, it's just a joke. That's not necessarily true. People can be hurt by words, right? The old thing that people used to say, of sticks and stones don't break my bones. But words really do hurt. They can be very hurtful for people, and they can influence people tremendously. And we need to be mindful of that. And and I love it. My students are still asking me whether or not Chapter 3 is due on Sunday. This is ironically funny. That's because I've talked with my students over and over again. I just got a flash message. I'll get back to that question in a little bit. But getting back to what I was talking about earlier is being mindful of the things that you say and do. And, we take measures and we decide on activities based very often on the feedback from others around us. And so we are not islands. We do have a connection and a responsibility for each other. Right? The question was not answered in scriptures, am I my brother's keeper? But the answer is yes, we are. We are responsible one to the other. And it's only by doing that that we can grow community. And if we look at most of the instructions that Torah holds for us, in Talmud as well, some are a little more obscure, like this one about shopping, but some of them are not. For example, Torah has this instruction of having one set of weights when you buy and when you sell. So I'm going to, yeah. On Stewart's Best of the Ask a Lawyer, it was talking about some of the more unusual laws that have been passed. And a couple of things, right? Whenever a law is passed, it's because somebody, did something that lawmakers find necessary to curb. Dear Stewart, I do remember that lion, that tiger getting loose in Ohio, and why the lawmakers wanted to change the law. Just as Floridians have been dealing with, is it okay to watch somebody drown and not call 911? Because 2 kids did that. And it often takes 1 or 2 that causes a law to be changed. And so we can imagine that if Torah said one set of weights for buying and selling, that there must have been some people who had different weights for buying and selling. So they were not ethical business people. And that's the point of it, right? These rules are rules of community. The don't covet your neighbor's wife, right? Don't covet his ox, don't covet this. Has to do with how do you live. When you're jealous of your neighbor, then you become not a good social neighbor. And there was a great line. I was watching reruns of Grey's Anatomy for whatever reason, and there's a line in there right in the first season where the 2 doctors vying for head of surgery or whatever the office was, and one says to the other, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, as to why he invited somebody else to lunch or to dinner, his competition for the position. And the other doctor turned around to him and said, we're not enemies, we're just competitors. And so that's there's a key thing involved here, in that when we're going to be in community, we need to remember that it's not it's not a hit and run where you do something to somebody and you never have to face them again. But we are, in fact, a much smaller planet than we think. And you never know when you're going to bump into somebody again. And it becomes important. You need to not intentionally harm somebody else. And if you unintentionally harm somebody, own up to it. Acknowledge it. Make restitution. And then you both can move forward. That's what this season that we're coming up to, these days of repentance, are all about. It's about, we call it a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the soul. And I'll have some worksheets out for my congregation, by the way, to make it a little easier to look at, how does our language influence what we say and do? If we talk derisively about people and things, then we practice being judgmental. If we talk kindly and we try to stick to what are the events that happened in non-emotional terms, then we can be a lot better at not being judgmental. Events happen. Things happen. Judging them is a whole different game. And so we're invited to not do that, right? If the glass spills and pours milk all over, may maybe that was intentional, maybe it was accidental. The event was the spilling. And what we do with it after that determines not only how we will feel, but also how those around us will feel. And we all see that when people have really strong emotions and start to distance themselves from each other, they're breaking down community. Right? So what are some of the emotions that break down community? Fear, anger, the negative emotions, the ones that make you feel apart from, either higher than, lower than, or just distanced from. Those emotions are the ones that we need to work against, the ones that help us be in community. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't spend some alone time. There's nothing wrong with curling up with a good book, with or without the dog or cat, and enjoying some private time and some growth time. But we also should not be afraid or alienating to others. We need to have time when we share space. And every religion, every tradition has in it a version of the golden rule. Right? Jewishly, we say, don't do to others what you would not want done to you. That can be put in the positive. It's actually a little more restrictive in the positive than in the negative. The negative's a little more inclusive because the other one is a proscription and this is offense. And so there's a slight difference there. And to me, that's really the key. How do you want to be treated? How, do you want to be shown respect? Do you want to be treated like a human being? Do you want to have what you have to say be worth hearing? Well, there's two parts to that. Obviously, you need to make what you're saying worth hearing, but you also are entitled, among other things, to the benefit of the doubt. You certainly should not get shut off before you say something, unless you have an extreme history of not talking and you start off on that same path. But even then, if it's at all possible, people need to be heard. People have a right to be heard. And people have a right to live in happiness and peace and tranquility with each other. We've got enough to share. I was very encouraged on my way here, or right before my show, I should say, the news that was talking about the chef that went to the Bahamas to see what the communities needed and actually try to bring those things. I know that IRSC is doing a drive right now to take needed things over to the Bahamas. We're close enough that we can do that. We can take things over to them that are needed. And, they need some help to get over this hump. Will they rebuild? Yeah. Right. People have lived on that island for hundreds of years, and Abaco Island is probably the most struck island in the world for hurricanes. It was an interesting little tidbit that I learned in my research on Dorian. One of the things that we often hear is that Florida gets a lot of hurricanes, and the reason for that, very simply, is that we have an awful lot of ocean front or Gulf front, the two places where hurricanes hit. And there's a whole different breed of hurricanes that start up and grow in the Gulf, others that come into the Gulf off of the feeder route, and others where the storm tracks up north. And I couldn't help thinking as we watched Dorian, I'm going to switch over to Dorian right now because Dorian seems to have been in our minds a lot. And I've been wondering this whole week, how many times before radar was there a storm like Dorian out there that people didn't know until they hit it? And I wonder how much of the Bermuda Triangle were these uncharted storms, because now that we're charting it, we know there's a lot of them, and some of them are big and some are not. People in Florida might not have known without the radar and without the coverage that there was in fact a hurricane just offshore. It never quite got as bad as it got for the Carolinas for us. There was a little bit of breeze, a little bit of flooding on the lake shore. And if you were further in, like at where I live in Port St. Lucie, there was some gentle breeze, a little bit of blowing, just like you'd get with a couple of thunderstorms. So storms are really very variable in what they'll bring. And the silver lining on them is people like that chef who go out of their way to help those who have a need. And that, to me, is what we're about as human beings. I often talk about human needs And as we come up to the holidays, it's one of the ways to do a tabulation on yourself. How do I take care of my own personal safety? How do I make sure that I have enough food and clothing and a roof over my head, the things that I need? And then we want variety. We want things to be different. We want, don't want peanut butter and jelly every day for lunch. Or maybe you do, I don't know, but maybe you want something different for dinner then. Or maybe you want different clothes, or whatever the variety is in your life. Maybe you like a little bit of uncertainty. Some people like a lot, some people like a little bit. What do you do? Let's see, so we've got certainty, uncertainty, and we've also got a need for love and connection. That's very important. We also need to be significant for people. We need to have somebody for whom we're important. And those are basic human needs. So how do you fulfill them? Do you do that in a way that satisfies these two higher needs? The two higher human needs are to learn and grow. And then above that is, how do I give back? What do I do for community, for each other, for the world? How do I move us forward? And those are the other two needs that we have. So we've got 6 basic human needs. It's one of the models. It's the one that seems to resonate for me. I know there's Maslow's and some other different definitions of human needs, but that's one. And so we can take a look at how we satisfy those needs and ask a couple of questions. Are they helping us with our long-term goals over time? Are we moving toward where we want to be in our life? Because the other reality is, and this holiday serves to remind us of that, we are getting older. We are using up our years, if you will. We only have so many of them. Some of us only have days, some only have weeks or months. But every day you are using up your chance to do the things that are important and worthwhile to you. So are you moving yourself toward those needs, those goals? Are you doing them in ways that don't hurt others? Because when we're doing that, then we are starting to do the things that help us live in community, that help us be with each other. And that, to me, is what all of Torah is really about. It's worth noting that in the middle, there's 5 books of Moses, the 5 books of Torah. It's not all of Jewish scriptures. Jewish scriptures has many more books. It has prophets and writings as well. But the 5 books of Moses, the Torah, the books that were turned into the Pentateuch, the first 5 books contain most of the rules and regulations of how we're supposed to live. And the middle of the middle book has the instruction in it: you shall love your neighbor as you love yourself. And this is a book that is often maligned. People don't realize that's one of the most quoted lines. It's certainly, as I mentioned in other shows, it's what Jesus quotes. Right? He actually quotes that exact line. He also quotes a line out of Deuteronomy that says, "Love God." We're supposed to love God. We're supposed to listen up and know that there's one God. And yeah, you look around, there's one creator of one universe. God created all of us. God didn't just create people with purple shirts or ponytails or bald heads. It's no selective group. It's all humans. We come in a variety of shapes and sizes and colors because I think God likes variety too. And you might say to me, well, no, God wants us to. No, God doesn't want us to all be alike, or God wouldn't have made so many palm trees with so many shades of green. Right? We were created by a God that loves diversity, that loves multitude, that loves colors, that loves all of these things, and invites us to love each other, to love this world that we live on, and to live in community in a way that grows us, that helps us be better, that helps us be stronger. And so this time of introspection that we're coming up to, the 10 days of awe, it starts with Rosh Hashanah, which is always the first of the Hebrew month of Tishrei, the month right after Elul, which is the month we're in right now. This year, Rosh Hashanah is the 29th of September, and the 30th, it's a Sunday night of Monday. We do have services, and you're welcome to register online and come join us. We welcome you to make a contribution to the congregation. We do not sell tickets at Congregation Eitz Chaim. We invite you to be part of the community and to join with us. So please do check it out. Feel free to give me a call. You can call me here right now on the station. We can talk more about it, 772-340-1590, or anything else that's crossing your mind that you might like to ask a rabbi about. So anyway, getting back to joining the you rattled me there. Sorry about that. I'm not supposed to rattle with those things. We're coming up to these days of reflection. It's a chance of doing what we call a cheshbon nefesh, an accounting of the soul. I started going there, and I went on an excursion, and now I'm coming back. I do that all the time. And so the cheshbon nefesh is an accounting. It's not just all the things I did wrong, but it's also all the things I did right. Because, accounting has both pluses and minuses on the tally sheet. And when all is said and done, there are some things that we probably, since we're human, wish we had done differently. And we can certainly, put in place some things to work at doing them better, to strive to be a better person. We're still going to make mistakes next year, and that's why there's going to be another chance, a year from now, to do it. And but we do this accounting. What are the things that I did right? What are the things that go, hey, that was me? What are the things that I go, wish that wasn't me? And those are opportunities for us to grow and be better this coming year. And I hope that you'll join me. My goal is to be a little bit better every year. And, obviously I've not accomplished it because I'm still here. God's not done with me yet, so I've still got work to do. As long as I'm breathing, there's still work to do. New challenges, new things to work on, new things to learn about myself and others. And so we can all move forward. That's what this is a time of. And when I find those, there's a great YouTube that an Israeli group put out where a guy has a mirror and he's drawing on it white circles with paint and black circles. And then he dips it in the water, and the water changes it to clear glass. And it's a great metaphor, but that's the idea of it. And when you have all of those black spots on it, those negative things, the things you wish you had done differently, it gives you an opportunity to call somebody and say, hey, I wish I hadn't done that. Is there some way that I can make that up to you? And we're invited to do 20% more good than we did bad. So restitution isn't just paying somebody back for the meal or the $10 that you borrowed from them, but in fact give them back $12 so that they can put that other $2 to something good that either they or somebody else needs. It's that kind of thing, just a simple little extra that you're doing to make it better for yourself and for others. And when you do that, then you can come into these days with a little bit of a sense of, I am doing what I can. Not, hey, I'm a great person, but just a kind of a settled, peaceful humility that I am working at it. I am a work in progress. I am getting better. And, then of course there's always the niggling question of what other little things should I remember that I haven't? And that's always the invitation. And I do extend that out to the world. If there's something that I've done that has wronged you and I can make restitution, please let me know. Now, what about the folks that we've lost? What if we've done some harm to somebody and they're no longer here for one reason or another? They're just not part of our life. Well, if they are still living, you can try to connect with them. You can go through intermediaries and things like that. Maybe you can make things up. Not create things, but repair things, that kind of make things up. The dangers of language, as I said that, I heard, no, it's not create, fabricate. It's repair and make restitution. And if somebody has passed, then we might, visit their plaque, their gravesite, a special place that we shared with them, or just a place where we can sit and ponder. A stream is a good place. all different kinds of things. The ocean, of course, is also readily available to folks in the Treasure Coast. Wherever you need to go, and just put a little bit of ease, and you might do some tzedakah, some righteous giving in that person's name to help make some of that restitution. Judaism requires that people give when others are in need. We don't call it charity, we call it tzedakah, righteous giving. You cannot consider yourself beginning to be righteous if you have not shared your blessings with those who are in need. And it even says those who are receiving assistance still need to give. It might not be in dollars, it might be in actions, but everybody is required to give. And it keeps getting dark, by the way, when I put my hand up there, because the light is on that side. It's just an angle of my iPad this morning. So a little bit for the folks that are on streaming with me on Facebook. So I've kind of talked a little bit about some of the different things in the Cheshbon Nefesh, and if you contact the station or contact me at the temple, I'll be glad to share that Cheshbon Nefesh with you. It's actually on my personal website. You can download it from there as well, and maybe I'll see if I can't get it uploaded to the temple website as well, so that if you want to bring that down and do that practice, it's a great practice to do this month leading up into the High Holy Day season. So those are some of the things. Rosh Hashanah, a celebration, a beginning of a new year. So let me warn folks before I get the emails and the Facebook posts, a Jewish year is not 365 days. That is a Gregorian year. Right? A Jewish year has 12 or 13 months, depending on whether or not it's a leap year. And those months are 29 to 30 days in length. So you're looking more at like 340 or 370 days. 365 is an average. When you use a lunar calendar, God didn't sync the moon with the solar year. There's a clue there that calendars are a little bit man-made and arbitrary. The moon, of course, was easy to use back in the day before we had electricity, before we wrote things down. You looked up in the sky. You probably did that at least once a day, every evening, and so you could tell when the new moon was there. It made life easy to keep track of. And, you could count how many moons for this and how many moons for that, and the word month has the word moon in it for some reason. Yeah, how about that? Yeah, works out that way. Right, the calendar, the Gregorian calendar, is a solar calendar. And that's another one of those not quite perfect things. It's 365 and a quarter, more or less, days. I always love that more or less. We wobble on our axis. We wobble on our orbit. None of this is perfect. It jiggles and jogs and it zigs and zags. And every so often we make adjustments. Most of us don't notice those. If it's a leap year, Jewishly we get an extra month. So we really do notice that. On the Gregorian calendar, there's an extra day if the year is divisible by 4, but not by 100. But again, yes, it is if it's 400, which gives you an idea how not so perfect it is. And then they still adjust it a few seconds every once in a while. You don't notice those because your cell phone is keeping track for you, or you can do what I found out my husband is still doing, which is calling the world clock and finding out what time it is on the world clock in Boulder. And guess what? God did not put the world clock in Boulder from the Garden of Eden. It's a much more recent human invention. And that's how your cell phones know what time it is. The world clock in Boulder, Colorado. If you're ever visiting Boulder, lots of things to see and do in Boulder. It's an amazing community. We have our rabbinic conference there once a year, and it is where Zalman lived. At the end of his life, his last several years were in Boulder, and there's a couple of colleges there and universities. And one of the things you can visit when you're in Boulder is the world clock. So you can watch it sitting there going tick, 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 and doing its little thing, trying to keep the world synchronized. Not so critical if you're talking about what time to go shopping when to meet your friends, because plus or minus a little bit of time's no big deal. A little more critical if you're talking about airline schedules and when they arrive and don't arrive. But what really, really needs the precision of a world clock is money. It has to leave one account and show up in the next account within the minute. And so timestamps become really important for money. You might not have realized that money runs the world, of course. And so it makes things much more important for timing. Here's another little thing a lot of people might not realize. The Swiss movement of watches comes from Arabs. They had a need for knowing what time to pray, and so they started to create clocks that operated, because some of their prayers happen at night, and you can't just use a sundial at night. The moon dial doesn't quite work. The moon is not as consistent for timing. It's consistent for months, but it's not good for telling you what hour of the night it is, partially because it comes up in the daytime too. The moon is all over the place, and so it's not good for telling time. And so because their prayers occur, the one right before bed's easy, when you're going to sleep most of the time. The one that's in the early hours before sunrise created a problem, and so they had to be able to time when to get up and say that prayer. And so they gave the movement when they were in Europe, and the Swiss made the Swiss movement, and then of course then we went to quartz, and now most of us use our cell phones for digital time. So the world has moved, that the telling of time has changed. And I didn't even discuss whoever that first person was who put a stick in the ground and noticed that the sun had a pattern of the hours. Sundials are very interesting, and they're worked a couple of different ways, but basically measures the number of hours or the time of daylight and divides it up into hours. That's a human invention. God didn't say, I took 60 minutes to do this and 30 seconds to create a tiger. It's God's time. And who are we to tell God what God's time should be? It's God's world, and it's, there's a Jewish philosopher named Maimonides who I think phrased it well. He said, the only thing we can know about God is that God's unknowable. All right. When we start to try to confine this idea of what is it that gives life, and that's where I start, right? God is the force that creates life. And what or how God does that, or how or what God interacts with us beyond that, is a function of what you've experienced and what your tradition teaches you that you still accept, or what you've discovered anew. But again, one universe, one creator. We're all on this planet together. We're all related to each other. The more DNA testing we do, the more we see that people are not some isolated strain of people, but we all have mixes and matches within us. It was really kind of interesting. They had I happened to catch, for no good reason, it started playing while I got distracted, and I came back to YouTube, and it was showing DNA kit results for a number of Muslims, and the diversity of the DNA for these 5 individuals, one from Egypt, one from Yemen, one from Iraq, one from Morocco, and I forget where the 5th one was from. But their bloodlines were all over the planet, and some of that was in fact Jewish. So we're all interconnected. We are all one big human family. And it's up to us then to move forward and go and do things better this coming year than we did last year. And you might well have owned all your stuff last year. Maybe you did a really great job of it, but there's still something new that you've learned about yourself or about someone else this year that perhaps you need to work on. There's always something that we can do. And that's the invitation of this time of year, this season. It's to take an accounting, to look at who and what we are and what we're doing. And do that with kindness to yourself and kindness to others. You can always interpret anything that you're seeing negatively or positively, or hopefully somewhere in the middle, somewhere rather neutrally, just recognizing events that happened. And then, try to work with those things in ways that are constructive, right? Things that build people up constructively, helpfully, not in your image, but each one in their own image. Right? When we hear in scriptures that God created us in God's image, that means exactly the way God intended us to be. So we are imperfect, perfect human beings. We're designed to be imperfect. That is what we can do so that we can get better, so that we can grow, so that we can give more. One of the things that Zalman taught was when we work to help others, to find the place in ourself where the pain is as close as we can imagine it to be to what the other person is feeling or experiencing. But not with the idea of, oh, I know how you feel, because the truth is we never do. We never know how somebody else feels. But to simply recognize that there is a place inside each of us that does carry pain, that does have pain. And how do you want to be treated to help that pain? Most of us don't want to be rescued. Most of us, we might want a hand up to get out of the pit, but we don't really want to be thrown over somebody's back and carried out of it. We want to be able to handle it on our own. And so we want to be empowered to be a stronger, better, more skillful person, better able to face the challenges of life. And so we work together and help each other. And that's part of this season too, is how can I do more of that? How can I help somebody else become who they truly can be? How can I help them, perhaps by modeling how to shed some of the negative emotion? Perhaps by asking some of the questions that allow them to consider what they're doing, but not, why are you doing that horrible thing? That's not how you ask the question. You don't put somebody on the defensive. It needs to be much more gentle. Again, how would you want to have somebody challenge you if you were the one doing that? Right? How would you want to be helped? How would you want to move forward? And when we treat each other with that kind of dignity, then we can model what it is to have a growing, good, fulfilling, giving life. And, I truly don't believe that people just want to take. Even people who are very needy want to be able to give back. It's been my experience that when I really work with some of those folks, that their real goal is a desire to have enough to give. And many of us feel that we're inadequate. And the real reality is that none of us is incapable of giving. We are all capable of giving. We are all capable of moving to the next step. We can do this, and we do it when we work together, when we interconnect. And some of that is, a little bit of quiet time and reflecting, and some of it's community time. One of the things that's also worth noting at this point, as I come down into the last 10 minutes of my time, is that Judaism, we collectively repent. And so we talk about, for any of us, all of us who have been bigoted, all of us who have been this or that, all of us who have been thieves, all of us who have given too much when we shouldn't have, or given too little when we shouldn't have. And we do that. We do a back and forth, too much and a too little, too much and too little. There's for the sin that I have sinned before you by doing this and by doing that. And we list it for a couple of reasons, one of which is that sometimes, far too often, we enable people to continue to do what is not constructive. We don't help them in ways that can help them move forward. We don't empower them. We enable them. And I'm very purposely using the addiction word of enabling. right? It is not helpful to allow the addict to continue their addiction. It is important to empower them to overcome their addiction, to work at getting the help they need to conquer that problem, to conquer that challenge. That, right, because the definition of an addiction is harming yourself or others, even when you know that you're harming them. That's an addiction. And whether it's video games or substances or whatever, violence. Some people are addicted to violence. Some people are addicted to adrenaline. There's all kinds of addictions in the world, many more than we can imagine. I knew a person who was addicted to books. If they didn't get a certain number of new books, even though they couldn't possibly read them, and they kept the number of books they needed to feel that they were getting enough, actually continued to grow. And it was a financial stress on them. And not to mention also the issue of where to put all the books and those other things. So addictions can be many different things. And what we need to do as a people is to empower people to be able to work through their stuff. If they ask for help, then, certainly give them, but not take over. Right? People do not want to be controlled, nor should they be. Nor should we strive to control anyone else. It's a wake-up call to all parents that as soon as the umbilical cord is cut, the baby is no longer attached and it starts to be its own person. It starts to act on its own. And there's a certain amount of independence that it needs. It needs boundaries. It needs instruction. It needs discipline. But it does not need control. And so, you do need to help it set boundaries. And you need to help keep it safe because it's not viable for a little while. But that's the hard part about life. There's no book, that's not even Torah, that gives you the exact rules of how and what in any detail. It's always very nebulous because every situation is different and every person is different. So there's always the challenge of, have I helped you enough? Have I helped you too much? Have I done too much so that it really wasn't help? Have I not helped you enough so that you were able? Have I helped you as much as I could? Have I helped you more than I could afford to help you? Those are all important questions. And that's, again, part of this introspection. Looking at and being willing to make course adjustments, rudder corrections, whichever allegory works for you. That's the season that we're coming into. An invitation to look at who and what we are and be the next level of person this coming year. And we're not going to succeed. We're not going to be perfect. And that's okay because we've got more to do next year. And hopefully we all have many more years. And work it through as best we can. And leave a good thing for different folks. So I'm going to switch gears here and go into the promotional thing for the last couple of minutes. We do have the second annual Treasure Coast Expo coming up in November. We are starting, we've got vendor table reservations occurring. I believe that the application is on the website. I'll double check that, make sure that it is. It's also up there for the February art show and craft festival and also the direct selling fest. So lots of exciting things coming up. We've got the High Holy Day services in season, Rosh Hashanah, the end of September, and into October we've got Yom Kippur. We've got Kol Nidre. We've got a great service planned for anyone who comes and an invitation for anyone who wants to join us. Please do register so that we can have a name tag and a prayer book for you. Those are important things. We don't get out more books than what we need. So it's important to have a good count. And if you want to be part of our Break the Fast after Yom Kippur, you can certainly make reservations for that as well. All of that, check our website, and reservation forms should be up and about there. Dorian delayed us a little bit, so I'm hoping that it's up there. If not, it will be by the end of the weekend. I know I promised that before, but Dorian kind of messed up the scheduling. So, and my prayers go out to everyone who is impacted by the storm, hoping that the Carolinas fare well and that the Bahamas come back as quickly as they can, and that people do step up and help everybody rebuild. And I'm very grateful for the Treasure Coast that we were spared that. So those are just some of the things. A reminder that our Friday night services are at 7:30 p.m., and we're at 540 Northwest University Boulevard. It's an office complex, and we're in Suite 102. That's the center of the front building. It's the blue office buildings across from Met Stadium, from First Data Field. And it's West Park office complex. We're next to the elevator in the front building, Suite 102. And kids are welcome to come to our Friday night service. It's all generations are welcome. And 7:30 p.m. and then Shabbat morning. Stolen Moments is suspended through September. We'll be starting up again after the High Holy Day season. Services are at 10:30 a.m. on Saturdays. Please do join us for that as well. And lots of exciting things coming on. If you're looking for bar or bat mitzvah training, we're also for your children. Please connect with us and see what we have for you. If you're looking to reconnect to your Judaism, please check us out. We also have a great adult ed program starting up in October. The flyers for that are on Facebook. I don't think they're on the website yet. I'll try to get them up there as well. And you can check my Facebook, look for Shafir Loeb, you'll find it there. Or you can look for it for Congregation Eitz Chaim, Port St. Lucie. Eitz Chaim PSL, I think, is the Facebook handle for it. But lots of different places to find us and lots of exciting things going on. And, I'm hoping that you'll perhaps join us and check us out. Feel free to give me a call. Nobody's called me here on the line, but you can always call at 772-340-1590. And I'm going to embarrass myself by saying I don't remember the temple phone number, but you can certainly look that up on either Facebook or on our webpage. I think it's 4110, but I wouldn't swear to that. And I'm truly not remembering the number. So there you go. She's having some timers. But please feel free to check it out and give us a call if you have any questions. You're also welcome to call my cell phone. That's listed there as well. So I wish everybody a really great season. I hope that everybody stayed safe and traveled safely for those who evacuated, and that you're making your way back in. And may the storms be gentle in our lives. May we start to figure out how to help each other through these things that happen in life. There will always be natural disasters, and hopefully we'll get better at responding to them and better at protecting people. Those are my wishes for you. I wish for you a great week, and check us out. It's Rabbi Shafir Loeb for Congregation Eitz Chaim, and this has been Ask a Rabbi.
It's been a real stressful week for everybody from the storm.
It has been.
Yes.
It has been. So a little bit, yeah. Chilling out.
The archives of this show are available on YouTube. Go to WPSLTV.com, go to our YouTube, and look for Ask a Rabbi. Heard on WPSL every Friday morning in the 11 o'clock hour, right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie.